Soul Survivor was a youth movement. Worship music was really very much at the heart of it, and I was so privileged to be the worship leader and be part of that from the beginning and help plant a church as well, Soul Survivor Watford. Those years were very, very special. It just felt like God was breathing on something, and it was amazing seeing tens of thousands of young people come together, and usually over 1,000 people at the summer festivals becoming Christians. No doubt to me, this was something God was doing, and it was an absolute thrill and a joy to be part of it.
There's been so much providence and so many precious people connected to Soul Survivor that we've got to do life with and be friends with. So much good has come from it, but there has been so much pain and so much damage.
So unfortunately, the situation at Soul Survivor is not as unique as we would hope. Misuses of power are endemic in the world, but they are also endemic in the church. And I think the church has got a huge amount to learn.
I'm really keen to be part of this because I think it's such an important moment in terms of the church speaking into something that really matters. I was up close to a lot of what happened way back at Soul Survivor with Mike Pilavachi. This is a subject where I feel like I do have a voice. I met Mike Pilavachi when I was 13 years old. He was my youth leader. I had a really good rapport with him. Honestly, had a good rapport with everyone. He was a youth leader with a lot of humor and warmth. We went on a weekend away as a youth group, and I was carrying a deep secret. I was actually being sexually abused. And during that weekend, I decided I would tell Mike, and he helped me go to the authorities and walk that through. But it's an interesting thing for me because I think because of that, I had an undying loyalty to him. I was probably seeing him every day, I would think. And then he started to counsel me about my sexual abuse, which looking back, I don't feel awesome about because he wasn't a trained counselor. He'd actually been an accountant just a few years before. And, I was telling him the deepest, darkest things, and he was asking me for the details of what happened. The real problematic thing to me about that is he would often wrestle me afterwards. Wrestling was definitely his thing. I know a lot of people who were physically wrestled by Mike, and honestly, it was quite often in a hidden room in the church, or it would be around his house, away from everyone. And looking back, I don't feel great about that. It didn't feel good at the time. I didn't really like physical touch that much because of what happened to me. I thought maybe this is a youth leader trying to break the tension, or it's what youth leaders do. Sometimes it could go on for 20 minutes. It was like full-on wrestling, but obviously this is a youth leader, this is an adult, this is hidden away from everyone. Looking back, I really don't feel good about it, and especially as sometimes it happened straight after we'd been talking about the details of the sexual abuse that I'd suffered.
Tell me, what was it like when you first arrived at Soul Survivor?
Well, I was bursting to be there. This was a really amazing opportunity. I remember just driving up and being so excited to start, and Mike was greeting, so it was so lovely, like a familiar face. I kind of, in my usual enthusiastic way, sort of saw Mike and hi, and he just looked at me in just a really angry way. And it was very disconcerting to think, is he angry with me? I've only ever had this lovely, warm relationship with him. He's my boss. And he ignored me. That interaction lasted for 6 months.
Once you got close to him, there was a whole lot going on that was unhealth. First, it feels like he would bring you in. But then it would go to the complete opposite, where you'd be completely shut out and silent treatment, stonewalled. And if you upset him in any way, if you offended him, it could be the smallest thing, honestly. Sometimes you didn't even know what it was. For me, one time, it was because I added an extra song onto the worship list I haven't checked with him, and he didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after that. on the stage, it was all smiles and laughs and jokes and, oh, Matt's my best friend and all this. And then once you get off the stage again, not a word, won't even look in your direction. At one time it went on for months. Another time I went on a trip to Norway with him. It was a 6-hour drive to the north of England to get on a ferry, then a 24-hour ferry crossing, and then a few days with him, and all the way back, the whole trip. Just me and Mike. I'm in my mid-teens. Mike didn't speak to me once the whole trip. He would only speak to me to answer yes or no questions about the worship songs in the set, or something practical, but no conversation. I was actually sharing a cabin with him too on this ferry crossing. Again, I question the wisdom there at this point.
If I approached him, he would ignore me. If I sat down, he would get up. If I asked for a meeting, he wasn't available. And I just felt embarrassed. And I felt confused. And I would try harder and it would make it worse. And then I would just try and stay on the down low. And that didn't make it better. I felt like a failure because something's happened that I've caused. And I felt like I was shrinking as a person. And, I just remember one day just feeling like I am so scared to go through those doors. And now I'm in this situation where my spiritual leader, my boss, whatever you want to call him, is effectively bullying me, or whatever you want to call it.
I think the soul survivor situation demonstrates how there are shades of abuse, and sometimes people can think, well, if there wasn't a penetrative sexual act, it's not abuse. And what this case, I think, shows is how wrong that thinking is, and how damaging other kinds of abuse really are. The impact of being shunned, being silenced, the impact of emotional abuse is hugely powerful and traumatic, especially when you add in the age differential and the power differential in a relationship. And when someone is a spiritual leader who is, hearing from God, and somebody that everybody really looks up to, and you're on the receiving end of their displeasure, there's a very strong spiritual and psychological penalty that is paid by someone on the receiving end of that.
Abuse has multiple dimensions. So that includes physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. These are the main subcategories of abuse. Abuse doesn't have to be of a sexual nature for it to be significant. The very nature of trauma is that people respond differently to it. So it's not helpful to draw a conclusion as to whether someone has experienced what they feel is severe trauma. We just don't know what a particular individual's experience may have been. Some people who experience abuse, whether it's broad-based or spiritual abuse, may experience depression. Another person may experience panic attacks. In other cases, it's maybe less well-defined in terms of a formal psychiatric diagnosis. But I'd want to emphasize the importance of this topic because it can have significant and in some cases long-lasting effects on the mental health of the person that's been affected.
I went to my GP, to my doctor. I just didn't feel like I was well. That was the impact it was having on me. And so actually at that point, I thought, I'm going to have to tell Mike, I actually can't do this job anymore. I can't be in this situation anymore. You're not talking to me. I don't know what I've done wrong. I'm so sorry if I've done something. And he just said to me in just a very dismissive, like the meeting's over kind of way, I'm Greek. And that was it. You just want to serve God and you want to do what you've been called to do, and you're bringing drama and negativity, but that's actually not true. You're just trying to figure out what is going on. And suddenly, it was like there was a reprieve. And I just remember feeling such relief. And yeah, like, wow, life can be like this. Like, when everything's okay, life can actually be like this. Like, I can stay here, I can do this job, I can work in this place. And it didn't last for very long. And Matt and I, we were dating still at that stage, and we had gone on a date to the cinema. And Mike had been calling Matt's landline and had not been able to get hold of him. And then they sort of had a conversation. It was like, well, where were you? I didn't know where you were. You didn't tell me. And then both of us were then frozen out from that point. And then we got engaged. And that was another massive trigger. And the silent treatment went on for months and months and months, right up until the night before our wedding. He was still not speaking to us.
Does the response of victims who stayed surprise you, that they hung around?
No, because part of it is, number one, they would be going against everyone to speak the truth and leave. And so they doubt themselves. The other piece is that there is a dynamic with an abuser and a victim. And there are ways in which the victim feels special, important, part of a big work. And yes, I did that, but you wouldn't want to destroy God's work, would you? You're a part of God's work. It's going to matter. It's not that they're going to deal with somebody who's abusive. They're going to bring down God's work. And they can't do that. That's wrong. That's not what they want. They want to honor God. They have a chance to honor God in that circle. And the kind of thinking that goes on there gets more and more twisted in order to stay.
For me, the hardest question to answer is why I stayed around so long. And it's actually very complicated and nuanced. I mean, I'm this 13-year-old boy who's, been rescued out of being sexually abused. So I had this undying loyalty to him for sure. And also, you love what God's doing through this ministry. You've got this amazing groundswell, this momentum. In a time where they saying young people are leaving the church, we had tens of thousands of young people journeying with us. And it was just very evident God was breathing on this. It didn't feel like human momentum. It felt like something beyond that. It was going to be super hard to walk away from that.
You tried to stay because you were passionate about the people and the mission and the ministry. And, we loved Mike. We wanted to be in ministry with him. And what an amazing opportunity. And so you don't just walk away from those things easily.
I honestly wish I'd left a lot earlier than I did. I don't feel I protected my wife very well. When you know better, you do better. And I think if I'd been approaching it at this age, I'd have left a whole lot sooner.
Over the years, people would come to us. There was a cycle, there's a pattern of, these precious people coming and going, these young guys coming to live with Mike. They would come to be his intern. They would live in his house, and they were starting to have this same experience. And you could see this playing out in their mental health and in their lives. And we wanted to help them, and they'd come to us. So the chaps went to the chair of the trustees, just said, this is what's happening, and described these patterns of behaviour that had been going on at this point for quite a few years. And basically, in summary, just said, you're silly boys, you need to grow up. It was completely shut down, wasn't validated, wasn't concerning. It was a maturity issue. So that was really brutal. And the last thing you want is for someone to suggest that you're causing trouble or you're being disruptive or it's on you. So it's a very shaming, confusing moment, because you've got to remember we were in our 20s. And so off we all went. They left, we left. That was a really sad moment.
I think there's a number of things going on. First of all, the enormous success of Soul Survivor and a feeling of we wouldn't want to stop what the Lord is doing in some way, as if bringing challenge to terrible behaviour might in some way harm the kingdom and impact. So you could see how perhaps people might have thought, there's this great cause and for the greater good, people need to get on with it somehow.
People work to protect the system rather than the sheep. And it's God's, we say, and therefore it has to be protected. So somebody comes forward and we say it's not true. Because if it's true, it's going to hurt God's work, and we don't want to do that. It can't be true. If it were true, we wouldn't be full of people in the pews. And again, because we love and worship, I think, the institution of the church, we think that's the right thing to do.
One of the things that stood out when I have seen people going through these sorts of experiences is the most painful thing for them is not being believed. And so it's really important that we should be slow to draw conclusions and to have advice or a solution. First and foremost, it's really important to listen to what's being said. Being validated is one of the most important parts of beginning this journey towards recovery.
And then as time went on, the world shut down for a little while. The festival stopped, and the Soul Survivor festival stopped. But you just know the cycle is still continuing. And then somebody reached out to Matt with just a really horrifying story that took it to a different level. And that's when we realized that these massages, one in a chair, and they were speaking on behalf of at least 10 interns who had been massaged in their underwear in Mike's bed. I spoke to Matt and I was like, look, how do you feel about me speaking to someone in the church, like outside of Soul Survivor? And Matt was like, yeah, I think we should. I think we have a responsibility. And so we approached a senior leader from a church in London. It was a very emotional conversation and said about these massages and said, who could we talk to? What could be done? And this person, not dismissively or unkindly, just matter-of-factly said, that's just Mike, nothing will be done.
You know what would always come back if you spoke to someone in authority would be this phrase, that's just Mike. And I've heard this phrase from so many people down through the years, and there's obviously recently a lot more so, that's just Mike. It was almost like saying, yeah, but you're going to get all this good stuff. He's going to lead these meetings great. He's going to speak. He's going to be funny. He's so gifted and talented. He's got this charismatic personality. And what you have to put up with for that is there's going to be this mistreatment side. Now, of course, that's outrageous.
Part of it is a revered leader. And when we have somebody like that, we automatically trust them and don't ask questions. Telling anybody that someone in that position is being abusive is something nobody wants to hear that. They're afraid of it. They think it can't possibly be true. This is a godly man. Look at all the things he or she has done. Look at the fruit that they're bearing. How can there be anything bad going on? And I think about Soul Survivor. You're talking about these patterns where the people in the church almost see the leader as Christ-like. They're the important one. They're the valued one. They're the one who will bring us close to God. They're the one hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people are coming to church for. And so how can any of that be? And so we want to protect the big person and not the little people, which, for the record, is utterly unlike Jesus Christ. That's not what he did.
Because he was this powerful leader and this brilliant communicator, and there was this tens of thousands of young people around the Soul Survivor movement, I think he got away with a lot more than he would have. And that's a huge lesson for us. If you hear about abuse, you have to report it, and it doesn't matter who the person is.
There's a whole load of different motives probably mixed together that basically amount to people not wanting to do anything about it.
I think all over through the seasons, through the years, I just kept praying that prayer from Genesis, which is let there be light. Powerful things happen when you pray those 4 words, and just kept praying that, like, God, I don't know what to do. There's all these people going to the festivals. This is wonderful. There's all these people coming to faith. Nobody wants to tear that down. Nobody wants to hurt the church. They even want to hurt Mike. I just want this to stop.
I felt at least my responsibility before God and, as a friend, would be to see whether I could help create a context where it would be safe for people to share their story and come forward and say what had happened.
And I didn't know there was such a thing as the NST. That's probably bad, but I had never heard of it. I didn't know there was such a thing. I would have definitely gone to them earlier had I known.
It's only been recently that we're beginning to see people coming forward about that abuse in churches and Christian organizations and actually being believed.
When people feel heard, when people feel safe, that sets the tone really for challenging issues such as this to be addressed without rushing to conclusions.
I'm aware now of the report with over 100 people coming forward. Some of them it was physical, all of them it was psychological and emotional. And it's really interesting, honestly, people who it happened to decades ago still haven't got past it.
Those that I've heard from, the damage is trauma, PTSD, horrific spiritual fallout, everything ranging from a total loss of faith and not being able to believe in God anymore. Everything from that to, people who are amazing Christian leaders, but who've really needed therapeutic help, spiritual intervention. There are definitely redemptive stories, but the truth coming out is so critical to this and so helpful for some victims to feel believed and to feel that, someone cares about my story and actually believes that this is true and believes that the damage is real.
The lessons we can learn as a church is to listen to people. When people come forward, it takes so much courage. It's a lot easier to live with things in the dark, but it is critical that things come to the light so that healing can take place and change can take place.
I think Jesus is an expert at bringing things into the light. And I think that's what's happening in this whole process. And I don't think it's because, finally the truth came out of this thing. I think Jesus is doing this. I think this is Jesus cleaning up his church and bringing something into the light that needed to be in the light.
And so what that means for me as a leader, and for others perhaps listening to this, is that if somebody discloses something or shares a concern with me about someone who's my friend or who I've greatly admired, at least approach that conversation with the posture that this is plausible, it is possible this has happened. And if it is even possible that this has happened, I must do something about it to help the person coming forward and to help all the potential other people that might have been harmed.
There needs to be a lot of teaching in the church by people who actually know what they're talking about in terms of abuse, what it is, the different faces it wears, how it's displayed, what to do when somebody says something like that, how to protect them, how to get them help, how to help them tell the truth. And I think that the understanding of abuse and how to respond to it should be one of the things that is taught in churches and Christian organizations always. It's not an add-on.
I would absolutely encourage anyone who has experienced spiritual abuse to get appropriate help. I think that help is probably multi-layered. For some people, they may have a very good network of family and friends, maybe people within the church community who can provide reassurance, support, and help them to process what has happened. For others, that may sit alongside professional support, and that could include seeing a general practitioner or a family physician. A layer up from that, maybe getting some counselling support, or seeing a clinician such as a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist or clinical psychologist.
Many, many people have spoken to this report, and they've told some really troubling behaviour. And the Church of England said, yes, this happened, and obviously there'll be discipline and all this. And even at that point, there's quite a large group of people still saying, no, I think it was exaggerated, or no, I can't bring myself to believe this, or Mike, you'll always be a hero to me. And that's a really disturbing thing that we have to look at in our church culture. Yes, we're all for forgiveness. We're all for moving forward. We do believe people can have a brand new start. Absolutely. Amen to that always. But this isn't about forgiveness. I've forgiven Mike, but this is about accountability.
At the heart of the gospel is this promise that the voiceless will be listened to, that the humble will be lifted high, that those who are seen as being of low degree will be raised up and their voices centred. And, it's a kind of ethic of the kingdom that we care about the poor and the lost and the broken. I think one of the things we can learn is that we need to apply that ethic not just in our outreach, but in our own structures, and make sure, those who are lower paid, those who are of lower status, that their voices are heard and listened to and taken seriously when concerns are raised.
And it's not unique to Soul Survivor, it's not unique to the church. There is abuse of power across the board, and we have to have systems in place where there is effective reporting, that there is a leadership structure where people can be heard and complaints, or whatever you want to call them, be taken seriously and be investigated. It is important that there's a process that is followed, and maybe, just maybe, there will be change in the church, and we will improve our safeguarding and our reporting and our support of survivors.
I think really the message from this whole thing is bring things into the light. If you see something happening to someone, you've got to bring it into the light with a leader who's in authority there. If you yourself are suffering of that, and you've been abused in some way by someone who should be a shepherd, a spiritual leader, a pastor to you, you have to bring it into the light.
I have been honored to do the work, and I am grateful to see, little by little, the church beginning to respond. There is a verse in 2 Chronicles, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear them, and I will forgive them, and I will heal them. The church at large needs to humble herself.